Good morning. I am Heather Ledoux. I'm the Executive Director of Professional Programs and Partnerships at Franklin Pierce University, and I also volunteer as the chair for our TechWomen Power Breakfast. So thank you again for joining us on this lovely day, lovely May Day. If you're new to joining us this morning, if you're a first timer, when we just type in the chat box and let us know that you're new, and we'll give you a nice warm welcome. For those of you who are regulars who come every month, thank you again for joining us today. Appreciate it. Just a couple housekeeping items for the people who are new. So when we're in this mode, you are on mute and your camera is off, just so you are aware. So no worries from that standpoint. Your camera and mute just goes off once we're back into the table format. Also, just wanted to let you know some other housekeeping things. When we're in presentation mode and you see the speaker, you probably see me in the side and then my slide right here in the slide in the one section. If you want the slide to be in full view, there are 4 little white arrows in the corner. If you click on those arrows, you'll get an expanded view. So you can change the viewpoint to see the topics, because I have a feeling when the presenter speaks later, there's going to be a lot of great details on the slides, and you may want to see them in full view. So just remember that. And today, I just wanted to let you know for the new people who have joined us here for our TechWomen Power Breakfast, we come together every month, and it's an amazing group of women and men. We come together really just to grow professionally. We want to grow personally. We share inspirational stories, we network, and we bring awareness to what's possible for women today in tech. And that's our whole mission. And it's a wonderful group of people. And during this pandemic, we've been meeting remotely. And we normally, for the last 6 years, have met in person. And some days we'll go back to that model. The TechWomen Power Breakfast is just one initiative within the New Hampshire Tech Alliance. And if you are interested in promoting these programs and learning more about them, you can go to their website, go to their page to find out about all the other wonderful events that the New Hampshire Tech Alliance puts on. Just go to nhtechalliance.org/calendar to learn about those events. And you can even download the calendar so it's in your calendar, so you always know when they're going on. Share the information. If you're having fun at these events, you learn something, share, please, on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever your social platforms are. We encourage you to share out. And also YouTube. So this is being recorded right now. We've recorded most of our monthly breakfast events, and the Alliance puts them up on their YouTube channel. So you can go back and look at prior events if you want on the YouTube channel. And this event will be posted whenever the Alliance can get around to it in the next couple weeks. You can keep a lookout for that. These breakfasts are made possible through our series sponsors. The benefits of sponsoring our breakfast is the opportunity to speak at events. So you've probably been at some breakfasts where we do the sponsor spotlight, and we allow the speaker, the sponsor, to come up and talk about their organization. Your company name is included in all the press releases prior to the event. And it really just highlights your company's commitment to supporting women and girls in technology. I wanted to make note that our TechWomen, TechGirls, the 6th annual TechWomen Awards nominations are open. So we have a Tech Professional of the Year, Tech Student of the Year, and Tech Teacher of the Year. So if you want to nominate someone, please go to the website and do so. And the annual luncheon will be held in June. I believe it's June 23rd, but you can check that on the events page. And all of these monthly breakfasts cannot happen with the support of my wonderful committee members, Shannon Herman, Ping King, Katie Geary, and Vandana Sharma. So if you have any questions about anything I've mentioned thus far this morning, reach out to any one of us. If you know any wonderful speakers that you think would be fantastic, let us know. Reach out. Obviously, we're always looking for amazing speakers. So just let us know. If your company or yourself are interested in sponsoring, reach out to one of us as well, and we'd be happy to guide you. So with that said, today I would like to introduce our speaker. Daniella is a global citizen and for the last 30 years has served as a primary care physician and healthcare leader in many regions of the world. She understands diseases as a complex interplay of not just pathogens, but also the physical and emotional ecosystem each person inhabits. As such, her passion is preventing disease and enhancing well-being through integrative approaches to lifestyle and mental health. Her wisdom is rooted in her deep love of nature. She is a public speaker and an organic farmer. She obtained her MD in Ecuador. She completed her residency training at Dartmouth, New Hampshire, and obtained a Master in Public Health from BU. She is a fellowship trained in integrative medicine through the University of Arizona, and she is California Healthcare Foundation Leadership Fellow. As the Chief Science Officer of Harmony Media, she oversees the research and development of evidence-based technologies that enhance well-being. And I just wanted to say, Danielle is also a personal friend of mine. We watched our children grow up together, so we've been friends for many years now in the same town. And not to embarrass you, Daniella, but she is one of these women that you sometimes say to yourself, how the heck does she do it all? They got nothing on Daniella because she literally makes you scratch your head how she can run a farm, be a doctor, raise a large, amazing family. So she's just so impressive. She's brilliant, and I love her, and she's so witty. So I want to welcome to our TechWomen breakfast, Daniella Connolly. Please share with me in welcoming Daniella. Okay, Daniella, you can join me on stage now. Just turn on your camera. And with this said, everybody, as you know, when we have our speakers, this platform's new to them. So please be kind if there are any tech issues along the way. And here we go. Hi, Daniella.
Hi, everyone.
I'm going to turn the baton over to you, Daniella, whenever you're ready.
Excellent. And I hope everybody can hear me. And I am going to do my darndest to make sure that we get started properly. Thank you so much, Heather, for inviting me. I'm very impressed with all the folks that are already on the meeting. And I'm really looking forward to, well, sharing my screen and chatting to you about the virtual reality prescription. Let me see if I can. Let me see if I can do this. Here we go. All right. Okay, I'm hoping that everybody can see this. My presentation is called the Virtual Reality Prescription. This is a tech breakfast after all, and I want you to consider the things that you're going to learn today, if they're new to you, as a really new frontier in medicine. As Heather, my name is Daniella Connolly. I am a resident here in New Hampshire. We've lived in New Hampshire, I think, for 16 years or so. I'm a primary care physician. As Heather pointed out, I'm trained in integrative medicine. Integrative medicine is basically what all primary care should be, which is trying to understand why somebody fundamentally becomes ill as opposed to simply treating symptoms. I'm also an organic farmer. I like to cook. I raise children and animals, not necessarily in that order. I'm an entrepreneur, and I come to you, though, as the Chief Science Officer of Harmony Media, a female-founded media company with some very, very exciting health tools that we'll review. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our origin story. As you know, I'm a physician, and it's fascinating when I see patients in my office. They might come in for, I don't know, a women's wellness checkup, or they might come in for pain in their knee, or they may come in for depression and anxiety, or ADHD, or back pain. And it's so interesting how often at the very core of the conversation that we're having between patient and physician is that there's a lot of stress in their life. And I want to just show you a little bit what stress does in terms of our mental awareness. When you're stressed, particularly chronic stress, you have a series of hormonal cascades that occur. Your cortisol level goes up, which in turn increases your insulin, which in turn makes you gain weight. When your cortisol goes up, for example, your sex hormones come down. And interestingly, in the brain, you become very narrowly focused, which makes sense, right? Because stress means that you're at risk somehow, and your focus has to narrow so that you survive the circumstance. The problem is that our stress is chronic, and so we are chronically narrow focused. And when you're very narrow focused, you lose the capacity to be intrinsically creative and have joy. And so this is a very interesting concept I want you to really sort of take in, because we can do a lot to reverse that. So I'm going to chat with you about something called the default mode network. This is something hot off the press. I would say the vast majority of clinicians aren't even aware of it. It's a neurological circuit that was discovered roughly about 10 years ago. So, you know, I think electric cars have been on the market longer than the default mode network. And you can see here a picture, and this is an fMRI scan showing these areas that are lit up, and this is your default mode network. And the default mode network is the place that we land when we're not engaged in an engrossing task. This is where you have a lot of the self-talk, a lot of the rumination, the thoughts that keep coming up. And it's a place that we go to often when you're not aware of it. So this is also a place where we think about others and what others might be thinking about us, which is very interesting. And it's a place where we think about the past and plan for the future. And if you've ever tried to be mindful and meditative, there's a real struggle, because our mind will always bring us either to planning for the future, which causes anxiety, or remembering the past, which for many of us can also induce anxiety. And this is called the default mode network. And it's been associated negatively with attention and creativity. So the more you're in that default mode network, the less likely you are to be creative. So this is really, it's a busy slide, lots of words, but I thought it might be useful in case you want to go back to figuring out where you're at with your default mode network. So this network of areas in the brain store your autographical memory. So this is where your perception of self sits. And unless you are a very equanimous person, at least for me, I know that my autographical information is often tainted by, I'm not doing this well enough, I'm not, exercising enough, I'm not being good enough at this or being good enough at that. So it's this area where we self-reflect, and often it gets us down, right? It's also a place of moral reasoning, where we make decisions about what is good, what is bad. We think about the past, remember the future. I'm sorry. Remember the past and think about the future. And so it's an interesting place to be, and one that is very linguistic and has a lot to do with telling stories. So think about all the times we've told ourselves stories that may or may not be true about ourselves. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions about this. So let's talk about the opposite of the default mode network. When the default mode network is silenced, and we'll get into that, you can go into this groovy thing called flow states, and you will have experienced this when you're crafting, for example, when you're coloring, when you're really getting into the groove with preparing a new recipe, when you're playing an instrument, when you're practicing for a play, when you're really engrossed in an activity, you stop thinking about yourself and how others might perceive you or how you perceive yourself. And really, you just kind of lose yourself in this creative process. And that is called a flow state. I'm hoping that we've all experienced this frequently. I have to say, my first awareness of a flow state was learning to play the banjo. So that I couldn't think of anything else except putting my fingers on the banjo and reading the music. So that was my first awareness of a flow state. So flow states, right? When we quiet the default mode network, which is that self-criticism center, all of a sudden, instead of narrowing your focus, we're expanding our focus and we feel empathy. You're able to escape those toxic self-narratives that we probably all have. And in that process, we're able to reconnect with entirely disparate parts of our brain. And this will dramatically increase creativity and joy and perception of new things. So new ideas come into play, new areas of self-awareness come into play. And so you can imagine that reaching these flow states can be incredibly healing, can be an extraordinary break. And so how do you get there, right? This is the question. So yes, of course, meditation. Yes, of course, but if meditation were easy, we would all be doing it and we wouldn't be grumpy ever. You can reach flow states by deeply enthralling experiences, so jumping out of airplanes, bungee jumping, all the crazy sports that we can do, but not everybody has access to that, right? Psychedelics. I'm sure many of you have read the recent headlines, many of which are in the New York Times. Just I think on Monday there was something about psychedelics and MDMA and the very effective treatment of PTSD. Psychedelics essentially switch off the default mode network. And what happens is that the rest of the brain interconnects possibly for the first time. And that's how you can have real breakthroughs in self-awareness. And that's how psychedelics work. They basically switch that default mode network off. But not everybody can do psychedelics, and certainly not on a Monday morning, for example. And so this brings me to virtual reality. And this is the space that I want to tell you about. I am the Chief Science Officer of Harmony Media. We are in the process of developing, as a business, a virtual reality prescription that will enhance productivity, creativity, give you a sense of relaxation. It'll enhance mental acuity. It's used for peak performance and simply just joy. The founder and president is a very good friend of mine, Helena Choi. And I'll give you a little bit of background in a later slide, but she and I came together. We've been friends for forever, but she approached me about 2 years ago to consider the development of this business. So what is it? It is a virtual reality experience. It's a highly curated visual and auditory experience. There is no language, because if you engage your linguistic side and your reading and your analytical side, you will not leave the default mode network. So this is a purely musical auditory experience. It simulates meditation and it induces that flow state that we talked about. Again, if meditation were easy, we would be doing it all the time, but it's hard. And if you have a presentation to give, if you have an important job that you've got to get done, it may be easier to put on your virtual reality headset, take a moment to flow, and then get into gear. So I just want to let you know right now we are, oh, look at my dyslexia. I put you, oh yeah, UCLA. We are working with UCLA. I'm very excited with the medical school there to do research on this product through fMRIs. We're going to be measuring cortisol levels to see if they drop, and we're going to be evaluating heart rate variability to sort of proxy measure the effect of reducing that default mode network. The next steps for us as a company include the research and development. We are very much in early stages for funding at this point, so if you're interested, let me know. And obviously then we'll have to get to market. We've identified various verticals, and so we're moving along this trajectory, which is very exciting, very new to me because I'm a doctor, and that's where we stand. So I want to conclude with that. Here are some of my details. Email me. I have a website. I'm terrible at Instagram, not fantastic at Facebook, but there you go. I still have it. And these are two books that I'd really like to share with you that I think are excellent reading. One is the VRX by Dr. Spiegel, who is also in LA and we've been in discussion with, and Michael Pollan's How to Change Your Mind. And I'll leave it at that. Fantastic book.
Thank you, Daniella. So I know we wanted to leave a lot of time for questions, and we wanted it to be interactive with the audience. So if we do need to go back and reference a slide, we can pop that back up too. So now what we're going to do is move to the Q&A portion, and on the top right-hand corner of your screen, if you could use the Q&A box as opposed to the chat box, this way it'll be easier for me to monitor them, and we can do that. And if anyone wants their camera turned on to speak directly to Daniella, type that in the chat box, and Josh or I can turn your camera on, and we can pull you on stage to speak directly with Daniella as an option as well. So with that said, the first question we have here is from Stephanie. Is the goal of the VR to put you in a parasympathetic state?
That's a very good question. And I guess that the brief answer is yes. So your sympathetic state, as you know, is that that threat awareness state where you prepare to take action because something is threatening you. And the parasympathetic state is that place when you're relaxed, where you can digest, when you can think about reproduction. And all of these concepts are intertwined, right? If you are able to be in a flow state, it means that you're not under threat. Otherwise, your brain wouldn't allow you to get there. And so as you wear the VR, we are measuring that parasympathetic state by looking at your heart rate variability and your cortisol levels. Heart rate variability is not the same thing as your heart rate. Heart rate variability is can best be described as this in-between sandwich state between sympathetic, which is your anxiety state, and your parasympathetic, which is your relaxed state. And most healthy people have this sort of bouncy state in between where you're ready for action, but you're also ready to relax. And that is your heart rate variability. So the more the more elevated that variability, the greater state of flexibility you're in, and the healthier you are. So that's one of the elements that we're measuring. And yes, it's all about the parasympathetic and getting to that really just that quiet place.
Thank you. I read about VR for burn victims. Are there other areas that VR is being implemented or considered for healthcare?
Yes. So for any of you that have ever used VR, or rather for many of us that had never used VR, it's really shocking. Once you put it on, the mind has a tough time just even fathoming the concept that you can be in a totally different space and you feel yourself in a different space. So you can imagine that it can be used during therapy. for PTSD, for example, it can be very effective. It's used to overcome phobias. So if any of you have, a phobia, I don't know, to spiders, for example, you can have a very gentle induction of getting to know spiders through the VR system. It is so engrossing that it's being used for in emergency departments to get people distracted from their pain. It's being used by urologists to distract men that are getting their vasectomies. I mean, it's used very, very broadly, and depending on what the content is, it can be very intellectually engaging, or it can be very moving at a spiritual level. And so there's a great potential to allow people to kind of escape their body and sense things in a different way. So there's definitely a lot of potential. The masks tend to be rather clunky at this point and heavy, and so it's not always easy. If you think about a burn patient, hopefully they would have nothing on their face or their, so that they can use it. But yes, it's being used medically, and the and the masks or the goggles are becoming more and more refined. And actually, as a company, as Harmony Media, we're looking to connect with technology that is preloaded so that the goggles can be very, very slim, and you can put them on, on a flight, for example.
So somebody asked if you wouldn't mind putting the book recommendations back up on the screen.
Sure. Let me just put that up. So it's a fascinating thing. He's actually a GI doctor who has become sort of the go-to medical specialist in all things virtual reality, and his book is quite fascinating. And it's so interesting how the discovery of the default mode network has generated this cross connection between the psychedelic world and the medical world. And you'll notice a lot of research into the use of psychedelics in the medical context. And so VRX is that intermediary where you're not ingesting psychedelics, but you're experiencing a very similar switching off of the default mode network. And he presents that incredibly well. And thankfully validates a lot of what Harmony Media is doing. So I'm very excited about that. And How to Change Your Mind, excellent book by Michael Pollan. It's sort of a primer, a reset on the use of psychedelics for the treatment of depression, anxiety, addiction, and just for your own betterment. So fascinating stuff.
Thanks, Daniella.
You bet.
Could you please speak more about what is involved in VR? And is it music?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, Heather?
Could you please speak more about what's involved with VR, and is it music?
What's involved? So virtual reality. So maybe let me just go back, and virtual reality for those that have never used it is it's a visual field that allows you to see as if in 3D, right? So it's not a television screen. It's this it's this play on depth. And so when you put on the mask, specifically with our product, you're slowly presented with geometric shapes that that move and expand and move through space, all the while listening to very evocative but not culturally centered music, and you travel in this 3D light space for about half an hour. And so you have sort of a music crescendo that takes you deeply into this movement, and then you decrescendo into a very quiet, relaxed state. The sounds are binaural, and there are underlying sounds that help sync your brain waves with meditative states. So it's a very therapeutic process, but really the way that you can experience it is just a very artistic, moving, 3D, quasi-psychedelic thing. It's very, very hard to describe, as you can see, because I'm using my hands. And again, it's not meant to be like there's a platform called that does the meditation. What's it called, Heather? It's Mind. I forget what it is, but it's not guided meditation. There is no speech. There's nothing you read. So it can be used by different people of different ages, people of different cultures. And just to give you a little bit of the origin story, Helena's mom used to be my colleague when I worked at Lawrence General Hospital, and she's an older lady who, fantastic physician, who started having symptoms of Alzheimer's. And it was very difficult for her to manage her anxiety. And because of the cognitive losses associated with Alzheimer's, it was virtually impossible for her to engage in guided imagery or meditation or yoga. And Helena was really looking for a peaceful solution for her mother. And that's how she came to think up the idea of VR.
Wow, that's do you plan on it being just like a prescription that you'll just use in the doctor's office?
That's a great question. So we're struggling to figure that out. You know, on the one hand, from a finance perspective, you know, for it to be used as a medical product, we would have to go through a FDA clearance, which is not impossible, of course. And that's partly why we're working with UCLA right now, because I think if the research, at least the preliminary research, is positive, then we may end up really going down the medical route. But that is a long process. And I don't know that the company can finance itself for that length of time. I think we're probably much more likely to pitch it to the world of people that are looking for self-improvement, people that are looking to heighten their performance, people that are looking to reduce stress, reduce anxiety, and for folks that can't meditate. And for all the meditation prescriptions that I hand out, you know who can't meditate? It's this one. Because I have too much of a busy mind, and so my default network is pinging all day long. So that would be for me, for example, if I need to unwind, if I need to prepare for something that's imperative that I be on point, I would use it.
Interesting. Okay, another question. So Carla asked, would you like me to field test this in the next month or so during labor and delivery? Carla's expecting twins, everybody. And I could see this being very beneficial. Are the results fairly instantaneous?
That is, Carla, yes. We will get you that headset. I have it at home. Is it instantaneous? Well, yes, because granted, when you put our system on, there's a slow ramp up, right? Because it is so enthralling. You can't just put this on and be, in a psychedelic space. It has to kind of happen slowly and then decrescendo so that you're not, caught off guard when you take off the mask. But the effect is pretty intense because you inevitably switch off that default mode network. You cannot think about your to-do list or think about, the diet that isn't going well or, all the things that we worry about. You can't think about that while you're experiencing this 3D dream because it is just so impactful. And that's where the instantaneousness of it comes.
And that leads me to another question. Someone asked, could you get motion sickness with VR?
Yes. So in our trials, which is basically a whole bunch of friends of mine, we did have one person that got a little bit disoriented because you lose your sense of where you're sitting and standing. And to that end, what we do is we encourage people to sort of wrap themselves up in a weighted blanket and to put themselves in a very comfortable position before putting on the mask so that you feel like your body is fully anchored. And then you can proceed with the journey. But it's a very good question. And there are definitely people that whatever the VR experience is, they're going to have a little bit of motion sickness. But again, to counter that, that weighted blanket, that getting really comfortable, getting sort of really firmly into your bed or your chair before going forward with it usually does the trick. And nobody in our experience has like been sick or anything. It's just a sensation you get as you sort of lift off.
Okay. Another question. You use the word, I actually don't know how to answer it.
Binaural?
Binaural. Oh, okay. So yeah, binaural. My understanding of this word is one audio input to the right ear and then different audio to the left ear. Is that what you meant?
Yes, correct. And what that does is that it gives you, it's sort of like hearing in 3D. You know, you have this visual thing, which is 3-dimensional, and then you have an auditory component that's 3-dimensional. And what that does is that it gives you a sense of depth, but also is incredibly enthralling for the brain to manage that, right? And so the less linear things are, the less likely you're going to fall back into that default mode network.
Okay. So another follow-up, is this related to binaural beats and therapy in the medical field?
Yes.
Okay. And then someone asked, so what if a person only has one functioning ear?
That's a good question. I mean, I think the audio is such that you hear it bilaterally. That's an interesting concept. I hadn't thought about that. Let me get back to you on that. I mean, I think you can hear it. It's, you know, like when one headphone like goes dead on you because the cat played with it earlier, you can still hear, but I think it's with lesser depth, if that makes sense. But I would actually have to speak to our technicians about that and verify. Good question.
Yeah. There you go. That's something to go back and during your testing to find out.
I'm writing it down.
All right, there we go. See, we got a bunch of smart women on this group. Okay, and she said, thanks. It's an odd thing hearing in one ear with no depth perception. So
yeah.
Okay, Ping asks, she says, hi, Daniella. Super interesting stuff. Can you describe the VR experience in more detail? What elicits the flow state, and are there different flavors, you know, for different people?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, the flow state is sort of a word to describe not being in your default mode network, right? And so because the experience is so enthralling and so unusual and so otherworldly, it allows you to turn down that default mode network, and the flow states result as a consequence of switching off the default mode network. And so what ends up happening is that somebody may be looking at all these visuals and you're sort of distracted, but in that state, you can have really profound ideas come up. You know, things that were otherwise untappable, because your default mode network is always on task trying to keep your ego in the forefront. And so as you reduce your ego, sometimes ideas come up, whether they're creative, or sometimes solutions come up that you hadn't thought of before. And that's what we're suggesting as a flow state. A flow state is nothing other than just intense interconnectivity of other parts of the brain with less management from the ego center or the default mode network, if that makes any sense.
Fascinating.
It is fascinating. It is fascinating. So, for example, one of the areas in which the use of psychedelics is being studied very aggressively is addiction. And we all know how much, particularly our state, but just the United States in general, has suffered. I mean, an entire generation has been lost to opiate addiction, and so we're still trying to figure that out. We're still trying to heal people from that illness. And what switching off the default mode network does, for example, with psychedelics, is that it allows you insight, very deep, profound insight that your ego may not want you to know, right? And so it's sort of a brand new frontier in psychiatry. And that's something I want folks to take away from this, is that, you know, in my case, I'm pitching the VR because psychedelics aren't really legal quite yet. But this concept of the default mode network is going to be at the center of a real paradigm shift in the treatment of mental health disorders. And what happens with psilocybin, which is the chemical in magic mushrooms, is that you can radically switch off the default mode network and you can see into your life without judgment. And so people come forward and say, oh my God, I understand why I have addiction. You know, I'm lonely, or trying to suppress all my life. And now that I've seen them, now that I, with empathy and without self-judgment, I can move forward. And I think that that's what's coming our way. I hope that answers the question. It's kind of all over the place.
No, that's great. Answered it quite well. So Carla asked a follow-up question. How long does the effect last, and how soon before your focused oriented task should you use the VR?
So that's a really good question. I mean, I think this is something that we're thinking a lot about. Oh, you know what? I forgot to answer. Flavors. So let me just get this question. Right now, we had a very interesting and very good production company in LA create, and we call it the potpourri. So kind of when you see it, you'll notice that it has lots of color elements, a lot of sound elements, a lot of music elements, and it's a little bit sort of the palette of what we can offer. As we get more funding, we would like to hone in on types of experiences. So the person that wants something that is uplifting, the person that wants something before bed, the person that wants to enhance focus before a board meeting, you know, so we really want to tailor it to the different needs of different people, men and women. There's been a lot of interest from sports teams in using this, for example, before a game. And the way that I see it in terms of length of effect, it's like, let's pretend we could all meditate, right? The idea with meditation is that you sit for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, you slow down your thinking. And what that allows you then is to have several hours of increased calm. And I think that that's what the use of the VR is going to be. You have a strategy, you have a meeting, you have a performance you have to give on some level. And if it's hard for you to meditate, you would use the VR. And I could imagine it gives you a couple of hours of just respite. You know, it's like a meditation session. So, but Heather, I'm not sure whether I answered Carla's question. Could you give it to me?
Yeah. She said, how long do you think that lasts, and how soon before your focus-oriented task should you use the VR?
So, like I said, it's much like a excellent meditation session. So you can imagine the effects linger because you've calmed yourself down. Your whole hormonal cascade has sort of settled. And I can imagine using it once a day or kind of as needed. And I think that once you take your VR headset off and you take a couple of minutes to sort of just gather yourself and de-wrinkle your hair, I think you're good to go. Don't forget, this isn't a medication, it's an experience. I think that's where the difference lies between, obviously, psychedelics will be used for PTSD, for all of these things. You can't do that on a regular basis, obviously. And so this is your psychedelic, any lingering effects, and you can do it on the plane, you can do it in the car before something.
So just like at the end of yoga, when you relax,
exactly.
When you're done, you get up and you just kind of stretch out a little. Like, okay.
Yeah. Exactly the same. Exactly the same.
Okay, and another question here, I think from Bill: is the journey curated by the clinician via screencasting, or is it pre-created presentation that would simply stream for a set period of time?
Yes, so it's a it's a pre-created, let's call it a movie. You know, it's a 30-minute experience. Obviously, you can take off the mask whenever you want to. If you get a phone call or whatever, you can, and then pop it back on. But it's sort of like a movie. And like I said, right now we have one movie, and that is kind of like a show and tell. This is all the things that we can do, and then once we get funding, and we'll expand to more films. The idea, and then from a business perspective, we're trying to figure out whether it's better to have our own goggles pre-set with a library of such experiences, or whether we create a kind of an app where people can have some kind of membership where every time we create a new movie or film, people can download it or pick and choose. But because it is such a profound experience, we're struggling with the notion of just kind of putting it out there versus allowing it to be provided by, let's say, a Medispa or a psychiatrist's office, because you will have deep insight. When you do switch off that default mode network, things come up, and we want to be very mindful about that. I mean, we trust the user, but at the same time, we want to make sure that people are supported. So we're trying to manage all of these things in a thoughtful way.
Sure. Somebody would like to know, how would you sign up to test it out?
Email me.
Okay. All right, I'm first. No, I'm just kidding. So this is very interesting. Someone asks, what kind of funding are you looking for?
A lot of it. And I'm going, I am not a business person. I am just a doctor. And so Helena is really the person that is our CEO, and she is right now working on patent issues, and which is a fascinating sphere, very difficult, highly complex, and yes, and so we're looking for funders. We applied to a couple of incubators, but we weren't far along enough in the process to fit the incubator model. But we would love that, because we need support. Right now it's Helena and I, and we'll have to expand from there.
Sorry, I just want to pop in and put a pause in the funding. There's some certain public solicitation things about funding, and and soliciting funding. So we got to be, we're good so far. Just making sure. Okay.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Noted she was just answering a question from somebody in the audience. So, all right, so we'll put a pin in that then. So, but they did ask if you could put up your contact information again, or if you wanted to provide Helena's contact information.
Yeah. So it's all in the slides. There's,
Okay.
I think the second to last slide has my contact details.
Okay. So for those of you, like I said, this is recorded. Josh will be putting this up on the YouTube channel in the next few days, I suppose. So just check that out and you can get to that from there. Okay. So I answered that and answered that and answered that. I'm just going through the box. And there's someone here. Okay. Josh says, yes, he will be posting this to YouTube. No worries. Okay. And then we have, oh, yeah, maybe afterwards when we go to the tables too. Okay. So we have another question from Bev. Thank you. This was really informative. Would love to be in a trial test sometime too. Yeah. So I think a lot of people would love to take part in a trial test. So absolutely. Any other questions from people? Anything anyone wants to say? And like I said, if you want to talk to Daniella directly right now, I could turn your camera on because we do have a little bit of time. You can formulate more questions and thoughts. And I'm just going through making sure I got everybody's questions and so forth. So while we're waiting to see if any more questions come up, anything else, Daniella, that you would like to add as far as VR or anything else you think that we'd be interested in?
It's dawning on me, or it has dawned on me, that every so often, every 20, 30 years, there's a real paradigm shift, both in technology, but also in the medical world. And if you think about it, antidepressants, in my mother's generation, how many women had postpartum depression and they were just, had no treatment. And then came the advent of Prozac, right? And I believe it was sort of the early 80s when Prozac came out, and it was an absolute game changer. Now, granted, antidepressants work about 30% of the time compared to placebo, but it was a game changer, and an entire generation of people were able to find respite from depression and anxiety and OCD and all of those things with the advent of all of those medications. But then for the past, what are we talking now? 40 years? There's been very little in terms of innovation in the psychiatric arena. It's just one medication that mimics the effect of the other. They're molecules that are very similar. You have SSRIs and SNRIs, but there hasn't been a lot of novelty. And I think the rise of the understanding of the default mode network will fundamentally shift the way that we understand depression, and the whole continuum on that line. And I do think that therapies that can affect or silence or reduce or mitigate those negative self-talking loops that we all have, I think is going to be a fundamental leap forward in psychiatry. And so I think for folks that are interested in that, please stay tuned, because I think we're going into a new era. And so being aware of what's out there, the new technologies, the research that's being done, it really is fascinating.
Absolutely. Another question from Ping. What has the collaboration with UCLA been like, and how do you share findings across coasts?
So we are starting, the Internal Review Board has approved our preliminary research study, and it's going to be on women in the cardiac rehab wing. We were very fortunate that Helena had a very good connection with one of the medical directors there, and that was our entrance into UCLA through the integrative medicine collaborative that they have there. I mean, you know, it's the West Coast, so they're much more groovy and willing to do interesting things. And that's why we went with UCLA. We had tried other universities. In fact, I reached out to UNH, but folks weren't really interested in helping us with that research. And what's fabulous about UCLA is that they're not charging us anything. They are truly interested in this concept. Imagine this non-invasive process that can really help people get into a meditative state. And we know all the benefits of meditation. That's been studied ad nauseum for the past, I don't know, 50 years. So we're tapping into that research. UCLA is very excited. Anytime you work with a big institution, it's slow. So we've been at this for a year, and just a week and a half ago, we got approval through the IRB. But it's free. So there you go. Whereas where we went to OSU, and I think they wanted to charge us $1 million just to get the research done.
Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Networking. Networking. There you go. It worked out really well for you. That's awesome. Okay, let's see what else we may have here. I just saw something pop up. Okay, so no more questions that are in the box right now. I'll keep monitoring it for another minute. This has been just so eye-opening for me because I'm one of those people, and we've had a couple breakfasts where we did talk about the benefits of the brain on meditation. So this is another step in continuing those conversations. Like you said, there's been so much research on it, and to think of it in a new light, I'm very anxious to see where this goes and test it out, learn more about it, because like I never even thought about the mental health portion of it that you talked about. So that's just,
it's going to be huge. You'll have to remember, you heard it here.
Yeah, absolutely. And another question did come in. Have you tried any of the Boston hospitals?
I have not. I have to say, I haven't. And I think in partly was because the film, the production of it was in LA, and Helena's very connected in New York. But you're right. I mean, if somebody wants to share with me, if they have insights into what hospital may be interested in researching this, I know that the people that are very much in the VR world are sort of located on the West Coast. It's very, Silicon Valley. But, I'll check in with Boston.
Yeah. Well, Danielle, thank you so much. This is fascinating. It provides new insight for, I think, most people that attended today. I wish you well on this, one of your many things that you're involved with.
I know.
You're probably, making butter right behind you too. So she says organic farmer. She literally does the farming, everybody. So it's amazing. So yes, so thank you so much. This was just fabulous. Really appreciate you educating us on VR within the medical field, the applications, learning more about this and what you're doing, and taking time today, because I know you have patients to go see. You're going to be darting out of here to drive down to Massachusetts to go tend to your patients. So I appreciate you taking time in your busy day. And like I said, everybody, this will be on YouTube, the New Hampshire Tech Alliance's YouTube channel, so you can check it out and reference anything that Daniella had talked about in the past.